Kay say hopa ho na tawak te trask. Tawa strani stie se strana se Joanna mata na tik no ikayo te kuna te sai wakchen. Kay tawa Joanna mata te nak te kuishe. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well today. And thank you for coming back for today's sessions. But before we go any further, I've asked Sister Consolata if she could lead us in a prayer this morning. And she's gracefully accepted to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and allow her to lead us in our prayer for today.
Kay tawa hopa, tawa straight Joshka. Weme tawa. I asked the governor if I could just introduce just a little bit of myself. My grandfather was Henry Ward Beecher, and he served as a councilman for many, many years. I remember he and Roland Johnson's grandfather from Powati used to come to our house to have lunch at our house. And that's how I got to know Roland Johnson's grandfather. I didn't know this was going to happen, that I would have the privilege of leading you in prayer and leading all of us in prayer this morning. And I had discovered a few days ago a prayer on the internet, and it said Pueblo after it was written out. And now I am so glad I saved it, because it was a premonition of God that I would be doing this. And I want to thank the governor for asking me to have this privilege of saying a prayer at a time when we have come together as a people. And what we are learning these 2 days is so very important to us as a nation, as a group of people, a proud people. And so we're all here today, and I want to thank you for that. I mean, I wish there were more people to look out to right now as I'm standing up here. Roshehina. Kaime Naishia Naya. Utsiti Notsiti. Gawamatzani. Tawae Kaimame through the years. Gawamatzani. Continue to do that for us. And so we go on and pray. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of dirt. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree that stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold out to life, even if it is easier to let go. Hold on to my hand, God says, even if I have gone away from you. But we know through the stories that we heard yesterday that God is certainly in our beings, in our hearts, in who we are as a people. And so we give him much thanks for this. Ta'e pe'e hano.
Thank you, sister. That was a beautiful prayer. So with that, please take your seats, and we'll go ahead and again, get back into our discussions relating the topic that we're here for today. Also, before we go any further, I'd like to invite the youth that are helping and assisting with this event. What I will ask them to do is just to introduce themselves and the village they're from and the clan that they come from as well. So come on over.
My name is Alva Somero, and I am from the village of Mesita. My clan is Little Water.
Goatise hopa. Wahina me kai tu ita usha chanista usha washista mana so. Hi everyone, my name is Jalissa and I'm from Parahi. My clans are Big Son and Little Son. My mother and father is Evelyn Romero. A lot of you are asking me who I was, and my mom is Evelyn. A lot of you know me.
Hi, my name is Sapphire. I come from the village of Mesita, and my clans are Big Roadrunner, Little Son.
My name is Elisa Zyman. I'm from the village of Laguna. My clans are Big Son and Little Roadrunner.
Hi, my name is Jelana Gallegos. My clans are Big Roadrunner and Little Son, and I'm from the village of Mesita.
Hi, my name is Desiree Chino. I'm from the village of Ensenal, and my clans are Big Son and Little Son.
Hi, my name is Jaden Sosi. I come from the village of Siama, and my clans are Big Lizard and Little Bear.
Hi, my name is Darian Dietz. I come from the village of Ensenal. My clans are Big Eagle and Little Snake.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Martinez. I come from the village of Siama. My grandparents are Dora and Edward Rubin, and my parents are Jerry and Jose Martinez. My clan is Big Turquoise. I also do work for the Pueblo of Laguna Behavioral Health Services. I am a prevention specialist and also a facilitator for the KYI. And I want to personally thank you, Governor Sayo and Dr. Luarki and the committee for asking the KYI to be a part of something that is much needed to be talked about within the community. And I know that we are striving to involve our youth within these types of efforts. And it is important for them to know what is going on around them and how topics like this do affect them in the future. And I just ask for everyone, from the top to, just your average community member, please encourage the youth within your home, within your community, your villages. Please encourage them to come out to join these types of efforts. The KYI is a platform and an avenue for them to be involved in these types of efforts. And so we just ask for you to please, just encourage them. I know that at this age, and which goes into the question, where do I belong? Who do I belong? That is a vital question that a lot of these youth are questioning themselves. And it might mean different interpretations to them. And, that's what we're here for, is to help them figure out, the self-discovery and how they're to identify themselves. So like I said, we please ask you to encourage the youth, and if you have to, push them a little bit, because nowadays, I'm a parent myself, and there's times where we're like, okay, we'll let you do whatever you want to do, as long as you're not getting in trouble, as long as you're doing okay. But sometimes they just need that extra push to be able to be involved in stuff like this. But again, I want to thank you all. Thank you, the committee. And I thank you all who came out today, and for those who keep encouraging our youth that have helped out yesterday. With that, I bid you a good day, and we're looking forward to what today has in store for us. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Jennifer Weaker. I work with the Sports and Wellness Department, and I'm from the village of Mesita, and my big clan is Big Turquoise and Little Sun.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all, and glad you could be here today. So you heard the folks that are out there to assist you today, so please use them. One of the things that I wanted to remind us of today is that the focus of our discussions are on the blood quantum method that we use currently to recognize members. I know there's a lot of you that probably have other questions related to Pueblo business and so forth, but I please ask that you keep focused on the discussion here today. I know language was another topic that was brought up yesterday, and as you heard, there'll be another conference in December on the 8th to discuss, the language and cultural initiatives that the Pueblo has. And I also ask that you be respectful of the time to allow others to present their points and ask their questions as well. So I'm grateful that you all have returned today, and I wish you all well. And we're going to need your thoughts, your input on how we move this forward. And as was mentioned, we are not going to decide today on what we do. There's still going to be a lot of community meetings related to this particular issue. We'll go into the villages and meet with the village members there at your communities too. If you're not comfortable in this forum here, maybe you'll be a little bit comfortable back in your own villages to discuss openly, how we go about moving forward related to recognizing our members. But I wish you all well today, and okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Luarki. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Okay, good morning again, everyone, and thank you for coming back and joining us. And those of you that are on YouTube as well, thank you very much for logging back in and joining us again today. It was pretty exciting to hear the different folks around the country. Several mentioned, and I got a couple emails last night as well from folks as far away as Boston, watching the event, some in Seattle, some in Phoenix. So it was pretty exciting to hear our people are very interested in this topic. So hopefully we continue to work together on this. So this morning, as we get started, just want to do a quick recap from yesterday. So we started out primarily with our traditional leaders giving us a foundation of where to start from, and reminding us the responsibility that we have to each other, to community, and to our existence as a Pueblo. So that was, I think, a very strong and clear purpose that they helped us to start with. We had then Mr. Paul Spruhan talk with us about the influence and impact of federal law on blood quantum and Native identity. And you saw historically where this whole issue came from. And it's, I think a lot of folks that I ran into yesterday and had the chance to chat with were amazed at, the amount of effort that the federal government has put into trying to do away with us versus trying to help us move forward. And then we had the, we had the lifting the blindfold piece, and that was the presentation that was specific to the Pueblo. And the slide that I got the most comment on that I think our committee heard a lot about was just the stark clarity that we received when we saw the graphic of if we had done nothing from 1958 up to 30 years out from now, where we would be as a tribe. It's very very alarming. And then we had a very special treat at lunch with Mr. Solomon, with Ron, presenting the history of his grandfather and his engagement here at the Pueblo and the relevance of the naturalization, the membership process in that, and the precedent that has been set, if you will, for our Pueblo. Including one of the other questions we were approached on quite a bit yesterday was the naturalization and the ordinance that's in place right now. That's an ordinance that has not been rescinded. But also later today, Lorraine's going to talk a little bit about this, issue because even in our current Constitution, based on the 2012 amendment that was made, there's still conflict there that we need to fix because tribal members, we shouldn't make it hard to be a member, right? And so she's going to touch on some of that this evening, and then lastly, we wrapped up with Dr. Pamela Palmater and her Exploring Intergenerational Memories, and that's another presentation we got a lot of feedback on, and people really liked her presentation. And basically I guess to put her presentation in a nutshell, it boiled down to, you got this, you can do this. Who are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? This is your thing. You don't need anybody's permission to do this. So those were the gist of the presentations yesterday, and I really appreciate all of you that stayed, the duration of the day. And I realize there's a lot of things going on, Veterans Day and family events and so on and so forth, but thank you for making the time and taking the time to be with us on this very important issue. One of the other questions we got was those of you that are on YouTube, and even here, anybody that's here, but in particular the folks that are on YouTube watching, we don't have a mechanism for them to submit questions or comments or whatnot. So to find a compromise, what we did is Pamela put together a hashtag. So on the presentation up here, you see the hashtag WhoBelongs2018. So those of you that are Twitter people, you can go to that hashtag and put your comments in. And I would ask, I would echo what Governor said, as we move through this process, we don't have a blueprint on how to do this. So, we're trying to work this as best we can. So I would ask and encourage that as you submit your comments, that hopefully there'll be comments that can help us move this process forward, to be constructive in moving this forward. So those of you that are Twitter people, please use this to help us capture your comments and suggestions. And again, I echo Governor's comments. Please be respectful in your comments when you post them out there, because this is our identity that we're looking at and that we're working to preserve and perpetuate. So how we reflect ourselves on the internet and on Twitter is also important. So I would ask that you do it in that manner. Those of you that are here, if you haven't already received a survey that's sitting up there, please grab one. The youth group can hand one out to you. We need to get that filled out. So we're using that to capture data on this topic. We'll also put it on the internet, on the Pueblos website. As Governor, we could put the presentations out there because a number of you have asked for the presentations. So we'll put that survey out there as well. And if you can fill that out and return it to us, probably to maybe to Lorraine or Marlene, and that might be the easiest way to get it back. And we'll put their contact information up here as well if you don't already have it. So that being said, yesterday was really focused on what got us here, what's the impact on Laguna. That was basically the theme yesterday. Today we're making a little bit of a transition to now putting some thought and consideration as to, so what are some of those solutions? What is it that we can begin to think about going forward? So we'll start this morning with Norbert Hill and Kathleen Rattery on their comparative models and what they're seeing out there in other tribes. As you heard, Norbertson also talk on civics. After that, we'll have some conversation and allow you to ask some questions. Then we'll go to the why do we put the word tribal before sovereignty, and really beginning to think about and building on Dr. Palmater's presentation of, we have the ability to do this. We have the authority to do this, and how do we exercise sovereignty in these types of elements. At lunch, we'll have Dr. Wilkins make his presentation on dismembered, and then we'll have a presentation right after lunch looking at the reflection on our history and process of this membership scenario. And we'll have former Governor Johnson and Governor Sayo as well up on the stage with us. And then we'll wrap up with Lorraine talking specifically to enrollment and what they're seeing in this current day and age. And then we'll wrap up. And hopefully we can get everybody out of here by 4:30, a little earlier than yesterday. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over here to Elsie and Lorraine, who are going to moderate this session. Let us, again, just on a housekeeping note, I didn't realize how cold it was in here yesterday, and so I understand it got really cold, so hopefully the heat will stay up today, so we apologize for that inconvenience today. So have a good day, everybody.
Good morning, Josh. It's good to see all the shining faces this morning. And I know that yesterday, if you felt like me, it was an overload on all the information that we heard. And I hope that today's information will get all of us to really thinking about how we can make changes. And like I said yesterday, it's all about our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and those that are yet to come. So this morning we're going to be talking about comparative models on membership. Is it blood quantum that makes a person native? Who belongs? Who gets to decide? The way in which we answer these questions impacts not only indigenous populations, but humans everywhere. With Senator Warren's Declaration of Native Heritage, these questions have become political lightning rods. Ultimately, blood quantum as a requirement for tribal belonging is not sustainable over time. To approach such a historically and politically charged topic, Hill and Rattery have edited a volume, The Great Vanishing Act, Blood Quantum and the Future of Native Nations. The volume celebrates Native and Indigenous perspectives from across the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan. Through essays, personal stories, case studies, satire, and poetry, these writers explore the biological and cultural metaphor of blood quantum, the most critical issue facing indigenous populations in the 20th century. From an Oneida perspective, Norbert Hill will discuss citizenship and responsibility, the pros and cons of the IRA, tribal demography, and the myth and reality of DNA and citizenship, using Senator Elizabeth Warren as a catalyst for understanding. He will cover indigenous civics, values, and governance, and the Haudenosaunee and the Great Law. Kathleen will discuss from a non-native perspective. She will discuss the book creation and the impact it has on conversation. Although the idea for this book began in Oneida, Wisconsin, the final result spans the globe. As the cultural concepts of identity, belonging, and blood also cross boundaries of nations, ethnicity, and tribe. Throughout the editing process, they worked very hard to include indigenous voices from tribes across the United States, First Nations in Canada, the Maori in New Zealand, and the Ainu in Japan. The book captures voices and perspectives that challenge culturally constructed categories of race, gender, identity, age, citizenship, and social status. All these authors in the book are resisting or embracing blood as a market of belonging in varying degrees. So while the specifics differ, the larger concerns are the same. Worries about what the future will look like, where blood quantum decides who is in and who is out.
Having these conversations, whether around the kitchen table or in an auditorium, are so important. Becoming or creating a citizen of a tribal nation is a way of exercising sovereignty and a way to pass on Native culture. What or who defines what it is to be Native? And who decides? What is blood quantum, and what does it have to do with Native identity? What does self-determination mean on an individual level? How can Native peoples preserve their culture and identity in spite of the blood quantum issue? What can non-Native allies do?
I'm Lorraine Silva. I'm the Tribal Enrollment Manager. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little overview of our speakers. Norbert Hill Jr. Norbert Hill Jr., Oneida, recently retired as Director of Education for the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. Hill's previous appointment was Vice President of the College of Menominee for their Green Bay campus. Hill served as the Executive Director of the American Indian Graduate Center in Minnesota. Previous positions include Executive Director of AIUSES, Assistant Dean of Students at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and the Director of the Educational Opportunity Program at the University of Colorado Boulder. He founded the Winds of Change and the American Indian Graduate Magazine publications of ACES and AIGC, respectively. Hill holds 2 honorary doctorates from Clarkson University and Cumberland College. Past board appointments include Environmental Defense Fund, Chair and Board Member of the Smithsonian Museum of American Indian, Trustee at St. Norbert College and the Wisconsin Historical Society. In 1989, Hill was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Action Council of Minorities in Engineering. In 2017, Hill co-authored an anthology, The Great Vanishing Act, Blood Quantum and the Future of Native Nations. Related presentations include Harvard University, University of Arizona, Villanova University, St. Norbert College, and Bush Foundation. Kathleen Rattery, MSMPH. She's the editor of The Great Vanishing Act, Blood Quantum and the Future of Native Nations. Kathleen is a doctoral student in the First Nations Education Program at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Previously, she has worked with the Oneida Nation Trust and Enrollment Committee as project manager for Sustain Oneida, a group that facilitates constructive community dialogue on tribal enrollment criteria. She wrote a series of articles for the Oneida tribal newspaper, the Kaliwisaks, on identity, citizenship, blood quantum, demographics, sovereignty, and tribal governance. The articles help to raise awareness of enrollment issues and population trends. Kathleen has also worked as a program evaluation consultant for the Menominee tribe at the Manassakea Wellness Center. Kathleen holds a Master of Science in Medical Anthropology, a Master of Public Health, and a Certificate of Global Health from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. During her graduate studies, Kathleen conducted fieldwork on the Pine Ridge and Cheyenne River reservations in South Dakota. She worked with the Native cancer patients as part of the Culturally Competent Patient Navigator Program, Walking Forward at the Rapid City Regional Hospital. She lives near Green Bay, Wisconsin with her husband, 2 young children, an itinerant dog, 8 chickens, 3 goats, and various wildlife. So here's Norbert Hill and Kathleen Rattery.
Good morning. Good morning. Just open this up here. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. So thank you for welcoming me here. It's really an honor, and I have so many things in my head right now from yesterday. Like Norbert was saying, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's just so much. And I'm learning so much while I'm here. So I'm very honored to be a part of this conversation because I am non-native and I'm learning every day what it means to be an ally. And so as I've talked about with my other student friends in my cohort at University of Green Bay, sometimes I'm at the back of the bus, sometimes I'm at the front of the bus, but ultimately it's not my bus, it's your bus. And so I'm trying to do that in the best way I can. So I've worked with the Trust and Enrollment Committee at Oneida, and the Oneida really made me feel welcome, which was an amazing thing because this conversation is very difficult, and I came as kind of very much an outsider. So I felt this kindness and respect. And so that motivated me in my work as an ally working in these issues. And so I felt this responsibility to reciprocate in some way, but I didn't know how. And then Norbert asked me to help edit this anthology about blood quantum, and my first thing I said was, no way. Like, that's just impossible. Because it's such a big issue. It's like the more you think about it, the deeper the hole gets. And I didn't know if I wanted to go there. I thought it was just too much. So we kind of constructed it as an anthology, and where it was like herding cats, because we have 23 different authors from around the world. So I got to spend 2 years interviewing people about what their nations are doing around issues of blood quantum, identity, and belonging. And I had the most wonderful conversations of my life during this time. So we're excited that we're now in our second printing of the book, and different universities and nations are using it to facilitate these kinds of conversations that Laguna is having here this weekend. So we're also very proud that all the royalties generated from the book are all going directly back to Oneida to keep these conversations going, because once you get started, you just go with it. You got to keep going, so it's to help that effort. The difficult thing is that it's about building consensus. It's not 50% plus one, and consensus takes time, and it's hard to do. So that's why we wanted to bring together a lot of different voices. So this is the book, and we have different case studies in it, and one of them is we've looked at the Maori in New Zealand, and I had the honor to visit them a number of years ago. So I wanted to just move for a minute about 7,000 miles from here, or 12,000 kilometers for the Canadians. So across the Pacific Ocean to the Maori people of Aotearoa, which is their word for New Zealand. And Leonie Pihama is Maori. She's one of the authors in the book. And she has a fascinating chapter in the book about, I like to talk about the Maori because yesterday was a lot of hard things and a lot of terrible things that have happened to Native peoples. And I like to talk about the Maori because they're doing so many good things for their people, and their language revitalization is really a success story, and they've kind of approached it in creative ways. So they have blood quantum. The words are a little bit different. They call it pure and half caste. And half caste is kind of like mixed blood. So their colonial history is a bit different because they didn't have Europeans coming in until much later, until I think the early 1800s. So the Maori are actually not originally from Aotearoa. They're from other Pacific islands, and they came to Aotearoa about 2,000 years ago. So a little bit of a different history. But they're trying to move away from blood quantum and reclaiming their clan system. So they have their Wahnau, which is their extended family of at least 3 generations, their Hapu, which is their sub-tribal group, and their Iwi, which literally means bone, like bones of ancestors. And those are what you would call the tribal groupings. So they're trying to rethink of themselves, not in terms of blood quantum, but within these kind of clan groupings, which is pretty amazing. And their language is a big component of this. So what they have is they actually have 24/7 TV channel. So you can watch The Bachelor in Maori. They have a lot of different programming. They have radio stations so that families can learn the language all together. So parents and grandparents and children can watch these programs and practice together. If they feel nervous about using the language, they can practice at home. And they also have what are called language nests, which are like kindergartens in very safe, kind of cozy, homely environments that started out just in different people's homes where families can come together and again learn together. And this is not something they waited for permission to do, they just did it. They just decided we're going to do this. And I think it was back in the 80s when they started these nests, and they've now spread all over the country. And I think Hawaii is doing a similar thing as well. So it's really exciting how successful it's been. The proportion of Maori now speaking the language is about 25%, and that's up a few points from what it was a decade ago, which seems small, but that's actually a really big deal. So they're very excited about this. And then the next example I have comes from the Inupiat in Alaska. And so we're going to the opposite end of the world. And they're facing the same issue of losing their language. And the young people are not getting that knowledge transmission from their elders. So there's a lot of fear that these creation stories and the language as elder speakers are passing on, that they're not getting it to the next generation. So it's very cold up there, obviously. You're inside a lot. Young kids play video games. They're on their phones, they're on their video games. So the elders said, maybe we can reach them in this way. So they worked with some game developers to create this game called Never Alone. And I don't know if anyone has heard of this game or not, but they have nearly 40 elders, storytellers, community members that contributed to the development of this game. And it's a puzzle game, so you can play as this young Inupiat girl named Nuna or an Arctic fox, and you can change which character you're playing as, and it's cooperative, collaborative play. You can play cooperatively with a friend or family. So you're trekking through this frozen tundra to help save this girl's village. And you explore the natural world, perform heroic deeds, and you meet these, they call them helping spirits. So in this picture here is an example. You meet these characters from the stories, and there are little film clips that you watch during the game where you hear these stories. So some of the elders are worried that they say, this isn't storytelling, you need to be face to face. It's not the same when you interact with a screen, which is true. And there are still things that are lost, but this is one way, and there can be many different ways. Like Dr. Palmer was talking about yesterday, there can be a lot of different things to do, and this is just one of them. So that's all I have for now, so I'm going to turn it over to my co-author, Norbert Hill, and he'll take it from there. So thank you very much.
She usually doesn't leave me any time to talk, but first I wanted to say thank you for the invitation to be with you for a couple of days. Thank Richard, the committee, the governor for their invitation, but also the hospitality of Pueblo people is like no other, and you're very generous. And what I noticed yesterday is how attentive the people were listening. There's this deep listening going on. And so there's a readiness to be able to deal with this difficult subject. Also, thanking Pamela this morning for her wonderful lecture yesterday. As Kathleen said, it was like drinking from a fire hydrant. But if we can imagine us working from a blank blackboard and saying, well, how do we create our membership? What do we do? What is the criteria? How do we do this in the long term? But we have to undo something before we get to the blank backboard again. So that makes it a challenge. So it's like building an airplane while you're flying it at the same time. And makes it really a challenge. So also I wanted to say that I have to give my disclaimer. Today I'm expressing my views. I'm not authorized by the tribe to speak on behalf of the tribe, but as a member of working with it, as a citizen of the United Nations, I'll express my views. First thing I wanted to say, and I think we talked about it yesterday, blood quantum is not sustainable over time. Blood quantum is not sustainable over time. You can't run from who you are or where you came from. Next thing I want to say is that Elizabeth Warren is not an Indian, and I'm not a pirate. But a few weeks ago, it was one of my favorite holidays is Halloween. And so we teach our kids united to go up to the doors and knock on the door and say, trick or treaty, and so we get a big kick out of that. So, but I had my eye patch on, so I kind of changed things up. I wore my Superman T-shirt, and a little boy came to the door and he was dressed as a pirate, and she says, he's about 7 years old. He says, "You're not a pirate, I am." And so I said, "No, you're not. I am. No, you're not. I am." And we went back and forth a little while, and so the little kid said to us, "If you're a pirate, what's your blood quantum?" And I said, "Well, my great-grandmother was a pirate princess, and I've got a DNA test to prove it." Yeah. He said, "Well, you don't have a parrot or a peg leg. You're a phony trying to be a pirate." So I grabbed 2 handfuls of candy, put it in his bag, and sent him on his way. So that is to say, beads, bracelets, and moccasins and sunglasses doesn't make you an Indian. Being an Indian and saying you're an Indian are 2 different things. Elizabeth Warren is running for president. I don't know her motivation, as whether it's personal or political, maybe a little bit both. But when she could have, she didn't stand up for natives on the pipeline issue last year. She didn't speak about the violence to Indian women or missing Indian women. But on her resume, she claimed she was of Indian heritage when she landed the position at the Harvard Law School. Well, while Indian students were there, asked her to come to several meetings, she never responded to them. Now, she might have a few drops of blood as an ancestor, but she's not a citizen of any nation. And if you can't identify a relative, dead or alive, your claim is pretty thin. But in my view, if you put it on your resume, she has responsibility. And yesterday, that's the word that came up a lot, responsibility, you know. And if you're going to use it as an identifier personally, I think you have to be responsible to do something with it. But I also wanted to extend my thank you to her because she was a catalyst of deep conversation in Indian country about DNA, blood quantum, sovereignty, belonging, and identity. So she generated a conversation that we couldn't have done it all by ourselves. It was happening across the country. So, but she has a birther issue that's going to haunt her, and the Republicans have a dog with a bone, and I'm sure it's going to haunt her for a long time. But let me say this, if she runs against President Trump, I would vote for her in a second. So people are complicated. But I also understand that she's working behind the scenes and working with some Indian groups in Massachusetts. But this is all about positioning. But she'd be more of an ally than Donald Trump, for sure. So when I was just talk a little bit about the book. When I first met Kathleen, my assessment is looking at somebody saying, are we both crazy enough to work with each other? And she passed the test. And, but what we were looking for is a starting point to begin this conversation. There's nothing out there. We were writing a few articles and trying to do it. And this blood quantum issue for us as a starting point was like a giant onion. Every time we peeled away a layer, there was another layer. Then there's another, and the onion never ends. But one of the first solutions, some of our people came up and say, well, we'll just get the women together and we'll just freeze all the eggs. I don't think that's going to work. So it would be sort of a cultural sci-fi kind of movie. But we've got to examine all the issues and to be able to sort them out and sift them. The first classroom that we ever have is the kitchen table. That's where we learn language. That's where we learn values. That's where we learn our family history. But the classroom has expanded. This is one of the nicest classrooms I've ever been in. And I would imagine as you proceed through this, this conversation that you're going to fill up this auditorium. And so, your identity of being an Indian is a lifelong process. It's not an event. And this is learning throughout our lifetime. The other thing I wanted to say, and Pamela mentioned yesterday, I have a different view of 7 generations. And I think I learned this from either Oren Lyons or John Mohawk, but we see the world through the lens of 7 generations. So let's say we take the 7 and we're right in the middle. And through our lifetime, we're going to know our parents, our grandparents, and perhaps our great-grandparents. And then if you move forward, you're going to know your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. So you can see life through the lens of 7 generations by looking back and looking forward. I don't know anybody that can look, if you say a generation is 20 years or 25 years, how you can look for 140 to 160 years ahead of time. It's just impossible. You can't see around the corner that far, but we can see through the lens of 7 generations. See, and that seems to make better sense to me. So in the book, if those of you have one, but you may borrow somebody else's book, there's a story about my grandmother on page 80. It's about 2 or 3 pages long. My grandmother was born in 1876, and she was a Mohawk orphan. And she graduated from medical school in 1899. And I want to thank Ron for his story yesterday, Ron Solomon, because every family has a story. Every family has a history. And if you dig far enough in it, there's pearls there. And there's the old, shoebox of stuff, or a shoebox of stories. And and Ron encouraged you to go back to your families and talk about this. It's not about my story. It's not about his story. My grandmother became a doctor in 1890. I'll make the long story short. But when she moved from Philadelphia and married my grandfather, who was Oneida, to the reservation in 1906, she made peace with the medicine men. And she said, if you can't fix them, send them to me, and if I can't fix them, I'll send them to you. So they worked together, and their work was about community health. It wasn't either or. It wasn't a battle. It was saying, what is that we can do to make our people healthy? And they got along just well. But anyway, the story about her being a Mohawk, and she was adopted into the tribe, but never put on the rolls. So she was a part of a community, but yet never a member of the nation. And it was an oversight or whatever it happened. It was 1949. But she used to say something like, going to school and getting an education are 2 different things. And they don't always happen at the same time, and that's so true. What we've been doing the last 2 days is part of our education. Yesterday, the attorney talked about the Dawes Act, the Indian Reorganization Act. I'm not going to go through all that, but I just say a couple of things. when it was legislation passed, it was hailed as the Indian New Deal, and other Indians called it the Indian Raw Deal. It made government programs available to tribes and an opportunity to recover some land. It also decreased the federal control over tribes, but we were still considered wards of the government. Hence, we have the BIA, making oversight. So they encouraged self-government responsibility, but they made, the stamp of approval. But we're getting away from that right now. So legislation was both praised and vilified by the tribes, and government lawyers drafted a model constitution. And so there was some seduction in there because there were some goodies in it. It was depression, and they were providing opportunities for natives. But in the fine print, or maybe not in the fine print so much, they wrote in blood quantum as a 1/4. And unfortunately, that we drank the Kool-Aid. And now, theoretically, we could terminate ourselves, but it provided a provision of a criteria, and most of them are, tribes decided what criteria they want to use, but most of them went to 1/4. I called the BIA and says, how many tribes in this country use the 1/4 standard as a marker for citizenship? And they didn't know. It's amazing to me they didn't know. But our markers for our own identity is culture, language, ceremonies, kinship, and values, not blood quantum. In Oklahoma, you could be 1/8 of 8 tribes and be a full blood, but not enrolled in any one tribe. You got some interesting configurations here too. You could be 1/8 of 8 different pueblos. I'm sure that you could probably find somebody like that, but not there. And then the Gunas, you made it a little more. You guys are a complicated bunch. This naturalization thing, you're tweaking blood quantum in a way, but you don't get yourself out of the box. And so it was interesting to learn how you come about that. But those are decisions that you need to figure out. But in 1936, my tribe, the Oneida Tribe of Wisconsin, adopted our Constitution. And at that time, the Oneida chiefs, they married the girl next door. And so somebody might have said, this is going to be a problem, but it's not going to be our problem. Here we are 2.5 generations later, and the problem's on top of us. Somebody says it's like a monkey on your back, but to me it's like a gorilla on our back, and it's not my gorilla, it's a construct of white men, So also, Indians marry out more than any other ethnic group in the country. So right now, in terms of Oneida, because we were moved from New York to Wisconsin, but we have 200 more years contact with white people. Of course, you guys had the Spaniards too, but 46% of our people are quarter bloods. Another 14% are half or less. So our greatest enemy right now is time. Not far behind the arguments we have is that the benefits and the revenue produced by gaming also, they connected blood quantum with benefits. And that's the seduction of people, especially poor people, wanting more benefits. And that's where we're stuck. So if we go from 1/4 to 1/8, that means our population will spike from 17,000 to, let's say, 25 or 30,000. We're not sure yet. But the problem with going with 1/4 to 1/8 is that in 20 years from now, we're going to have the conversation about going from 1/8 to 1/16. So how far do you go down? Where the math doesn't work over time. You don't have to be a math major to figure that out. So what we're stuck with is, I call it the grandmother's dilemma. And grandmothers know in their head that blood quantum is not sustainable. They know that. It's that, but they also know in their heart they want their children and grandchildren to be enrolled for all the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Now, yesterday, Pamela got us to thinking outside the box. Like, we're so oppressed by the box. We're institutionalized, we're oppressed, it's decolonization, and we even see ourselves in terms of blood. And so I think what's going to happen is that I'm seeing a shift in the conversation. Before, blood quantum was the noun, and that's what we're trying to work with, trying to wrestle with this monster. But I think the conversation is shifting to values, responsibility, belonging, sovereignty, and nationhood. Those are the right conversations, and then blood quantum becomes a detail, So thank you, Pamela, for opening up that door for us. And so she helped us put language to experience. We know the experience, but we couldn't put language to it and so it's just a pathway, and that pathway could be tweaked to suit our purposes, so it wasn't a cookie cutter recipe, but it was a way of looking at it in terms of living our values. So the grandmothers have an argument between the head and the heart. So we find our people right now, we're just sort of kind of in a decision paralysis. And so when you're in that position, you do nothing. And when you do nothing, it's a decision when time is your enemy. So it comes down to, are we members of a club or citizens of a nation? If we are members of a club, let's say Costco, you can go down there and buy things, at a discount, but you get the benefit of belonging to Costco. And when I lived in Albuquerque, I belonged to Costco. But if we're citizens of a nation, we have responsibility. We see ourselves as citizens, we do have responsibility. So if you have a book on page 289, Joe Call and Steve Cornell talked about membership and citizenship. Also, even before that, on page 80 is referred to as my grandmother's little story, but there's a quote there from Senator Higgins from Delaware. And yesterday, it's the first time I ever saw a picture of him. But there's a quote with him, and he says, to solve the Indian problem, it's intermarriage. And that was prior to the Civil War. So blood quantum, this issue of identity, I don't even want to say that anymore, but our issues of identity and reinventing ourselves may be the most important decisions Indians will make this century. So, do you have the Rubik's Cube, do you? Okay, so I use this as a metaphor. So, and every one of these little squares has an issue. I was talking about the onion, but every time you turn it, it turns to a different color. And some of you can put it together, but we need to have all the colors be congruent. And we'll be talking about our future in our nations. So that was sort of a nice way to use it as a metaphor. Theoretically, we could terminate ourselves with our own hand. In Oneida, our mortality rate is increasing and our birth rate is decreasing. So baby boomers are dying out, and families are of 1 or 2 children now rather than of 10. And so, you showed the graph yesterday in terms of how our populations, the slope is going to be decreasing. So then again, how do we sustain our communities? So we have the opportunity to reinvent ourselves, and the operative word is opportunity. So you got to take that to heart. We must be guardians of ourselves. Again, we can't run from who we are or where we came from. And nobody's going to save us but us. So we have a deep belief system in blood quantum. I mean, we have a belief system. It's a belief system now. That's how we identify ourselves. And so when you take a belief system away from somebody, you take it away from them, you got to replace it with something. So if you don't replace it with something, you're going to go crazy, because it'll just leave a void, and a void that's of identity and belonging and everything else. So as you think about if you're going to do something with blood quantum, that if you replace it with something, have something that replaces it and that it's better. And so I think we have the wisdom and the smarts to be able to do that. When I was young and dumb, my dear wife of 36 years says, nothing much has changed, and when was that? But I thought about giving up my citizenship, U.S. citizenship, and I thought, well, where are they going to deport me? To New York or Wisconsin? You know? They could deport you to a different village in Laguna. But I figured right now, if I did that, Trump would, I would have be in jail with some kind of trumped-up charge of treason. So what I was trying to recruit is 1,000 people to give up their citizenship at the same time. So they could put us all in jail. I was thinking even larger numbers, but you know, you could really create a crisis with this. And so I went to the Native American Rights Fund saying, well, will you defend me in this lawsuit if we give up our citizenship? And they sent me away, so it didn't work. But I didn't know all these little things would happen that led me to thinking about a book. The cartoon on the back that you can see is, I saw that cartoon of Marty Tubal's, and I said, there's a book behind that cartoon. And so we got a publisher before we even wrote one word. And we had a cover, at least I thought I had a cover until I met Kathleen. And the cover is better now. I mean, it has a beadwork of a DNA, and political cartoons don't sell books anyway. But what I'm getting to is that I was getting back to Indian civics. And civics sounds pretty boring, but I have dual citizenship, and so do you. I'm an American citizen, and I'm a citizen of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. So in 1972, I just out of graduate school, I applied for a position at a local university, and one of the faculty members in a group interview asked me a question. He says, "Why are you an Indian?" You know, and I was sort of stunned. Nobody ever asked me that question, and I said, "Well, it came with the body. Why?" You know, I couldn't think of anything else, and then thinking later, saying I should have said, "Well, how much time do you have?" You know, or I wanted to ask him, why is he white, you know? But in the final analysis, it's really a good question, but it's not an interview question. It's a great question that we should be asking ourselves internally, that we ask ourselves, we talk to our friends and neighbors and our family members. We ask it of our own identity, but we also ask it as a collective. It's a wonderful question, and I think one that we're starting to come to grips with. Some of you may know Shirley Hill-Witt. She lives in Albuquerque. She's a Mohawk. And we talked about the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, the great law that how we were formed and how we were governed. And she's a real traditionalist. And we had a little discussion about that. And she says, being a Mohawk, she put her hand on her heart and she says, I wear the great law inside of me. You have the equivalent of a great law. I don't know what your great law is, but you have to wear your identity inside of it, inside of yourself. You can't just say, well, I'm Laguna, and maybe you know when the Pueblo Revolt was, and you make a piece of pottery, but also you got to live the values inside of yourself. Closer to the mic, okay. You know, they say about Olympic athletes, they wear the gold inside before they win the medal. You know, in terms of Laguna, you wear your identity inside before you're a citizen, you know. You know, Laguna, as I understand from Richard, is an IRA government in 1949, but Acoma isn't. And so half the Pueblos are IRA governments and the other half aren't. I've not done the math, but it's a split. That's what makes your stuff a little bit more complicated. But there's a duality which we live in, and you have a blend of religion and governance. It's not either or, but it's a both and it's a nice blend. I mean, you know, you guys really have, you know, the Iroquois people will fight against the Christians against the Longhouse, you know, and that's a fight to the death. But you've been able to blend both these in a ways that become part of your belief system. So it's a theocracy of government. you know, yesterday you talked about it's tomorrow's Veterans Day or today, and Indians are first to join the military. In Oneida, we had 13 officers in George Washington's Continental Army. We fought in every war this country has ever had. Indians are the first to sign up. They don't sign up for the Army, they sign up for the Marines, you know. But Indians are sort of the archetype warrior in that we'll fight for this country and we're patriotic, but this is our country first, and we'll fight for it, you know. And I think that's part of the honor that we give our veterans. So the other thing is home. And somebody says, well, where's your real home? Where's your, you know? And Ron talked about it yesterday. He said, I have a house in Albuquerque, but I have a home in Laguna. When I lived here or I lived in Colorado, I had a home in Colorado and I had a home in Wisconsin. I had a house in Colorado, a home in Wisconsin. And somebody says, you know, when you're really home is where are the bones of your grandfathers? That's your home. And this is, they can never take that away from you, you know. So when I was in the 9th grade, I just want to talk a little more about civics because, you know, in the 9th grade, we take a civics course, or U.S. government, and you were surrounded by all the stuff. We learned the Pledge of Allegiance, the 3 branches of government, the 2-party system, the Bill of Rights, the national anthem, all this other business. And in the 8th grade, I got to be the flag boy. And so I got out of religion class, which is great, you know, and then I learned how to fold a flag. But that's part of being a U.S. citizen. You learn how to do these kinds of things. But also I have a dual responsibility of knowing Oneida civics. I need to know my own government. And we don't teach it very well. And I think, you know, I just want to say this, I got to remember this. Native American Calling tomorrow at 11 o'clock, it's on the radio here. They'll have a discussion about Indian citizenship. And so that might be part of your learning beyond today. But I know the great law, the Thanksgiving prayer, the clan system, the matrilineal governance, and other things that I'm supposed to know. And so I wrote a small paper, which Richard has a copy, and I'm sure if you ask him, he'll give you a copy of it. But it's called Being Oneida, a Value Proposition. I'll just read part of it. There are certain things that Oneida citizens should know. Citizens should be able to expected to learn our history and culture, civic education, the Oneida Constitution, the great law should be available online as online seminars. You could do that here with your own stuff and available to all. We should all remember the Thanksgiving address. All the words are simple. When they come together, they become a statement of identity, an exercise of sovereignty, both political and cultural. These words generate a civics lessons, a political structure, a bill of responsibilities, a social contract, a roll call of gifts given to us as human beings, an invocation of gratitude, and a material scientific inventory of the natural world all in one. The Haudenosaunee decision-making proceeds from consensus, not by a vote of a majority. And our decision is made when our minds are one. So the Thanksgiving address in our world is a brilliant political preamble of self-governance. The other thing I wanted to say, our values are the glue and the bond that hold us together. And if we lose our values, we lose the nation. So I wouldn't know how to tell you to do a Laguna value proposition. Those are your words, and those are the things that your community has to put together, because I certainly couldn't do it. But you can use mine as a model if you do, or make your own up. But I also thinking that I was in higher ed for a long time, and you have a college, and it's called the University of Kiva. You know, the community college called Kiva. I mean, the lessons that you all learn about who you are, that's it's like part of your hands, and you can't take your hands off your arm, you know. And so, you know, I don't know the politics, or I don't know how things are made, but that goes back a long time. And your value proposition is about your founding documents. 2 minutes, okay. I only have 40 more minutes, so, no, okay. I'm almost done. You know, Indian students should get financial aid to come home for dances and ceremonies. So I'm going to say that you have a two-way vision. In one eye is the short vision of what you're going to do today, tomorrow, and next month. And the other eye is a long-term vision saying, you've been here for 1,000 years, so how do you build a place where you can look at another 500 or 1,000 years? So you got to have both at the same time. So it's the micro and the macro. So you got to looking forward and looking backward and moving forward at the same time, and that's where you're going to get perspective. I would also urge you to go to the University of New Mexico, see if you can find a demographer to work with you, to help you to study populations and questions that you haven't thought about. But that'll give you a long-term view, and I'm urging all nations to do that. But we're in a moment of history we can't afford to lose. History is built on the shoulders of contemporary people. Yesterday's meeting was history. We were looking at the past, present, and the future at the same time of our identity. So you can't throw the ancestors under the bus. You got to live for today, but you got to think of the future. So we think about, I was talking to a lot of us seniors were here yesterday, and we all think about what kind of world are we going to live? What is our legacy for these young people? And we have young people on the stage. And so it's a meeting of leaving a world that makes sense, but also having the kids to pay it forward. And somewhere we meet in between, and I think it's a beautiful way to do it. So knowing our culture, our language, our dances, our songs, our tradition, our customs, our history is just important for all of us. But it's one thing to know these things, but another to live them. So I remember about 15 years I was at your feast day, and it was just a beautiful thing. And right at the end, there's 3 groups dancing separately, but they all danced off together. And the songs were different, but they were all in harmony. So I think you got to figure out how to do the identity dance in harmony. You just did that so beautifully. So we have the responsibility to be guardians of ourselves. I was thinking, if somebody once said, if aliens invaded the Americas and they wiped out all the Indian people, and in 200 years, the Laguna people from here would rise up from the soil. Your roots are deep here, and you are the soul of this territory. And so you have started a conversation of community education. I encourage you to keep your momentum. The gift that you have is each other. Somebody said, how long are Indians going to last in America? And somebody answered, an elder answered and says, until the last song is sung. So make sure your young people learn the songs. Let me leave you with a prayer, a short prayer. May the Creator bless you in a mighty way, and that you always remember the most powerful weapon in the universe is the human soul on fire. I encourage you to move forward with a good heart and a good mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Norbert and Kathleen. Let's give them another round of applause, please. We'll have a few minutes to take questions. If anyone has a question that they would like to ask, can't see. Okay. If there's anyone that would like to ask them a question, there's one way up there. Who's got the, oh, okay. Yeah. Way up there.
Здравствуйте, здравствуйте. Tawai Strana, Stranestia, Gatsana Gopistaya, Tiayo, Wanamatan. Good morning, everybody. One thing, and thank you for the presentations, presenters. One of the areas that I didn't hear just so clear was if those tribes that moved away from blood quantum, what structure or methodology did they use to implement their enrollment, and were they successful or not? And is there any literature on that so we can do a little bit more research on that? Thank you.
Yeah, that was, I believe, what you're asking about is the Maori, because they have a similar kind of blood quantum system. The words are just different, where they call it pure blood, and half caste. And half caste is considered, there's no more fractionating after that. It's just kind of more black and white, I guess, more of a binary sort of thing. And they're trying to move away from that. So my understanding is that it's still in place, but within the last decade or so, they have really been going back to the clan system, the Wokpakpa and the Iwi, which is like your tribal groupings. So the Wokpapa is like the big umbrella sort of grouping, and then it goes down into smaller groupings. And people are going back and they're asking where they are, where they belong in, and so they'll introduce themselves by their iwi, and that's becoming more common. So as far as legislation and changes in the law, I know that it's a little different from here because there's so many indigenous advocates and lawyers that are in the legal sphere in this country and in Canada. In New Zealand, it's different. They don't have that same presence in the legal system. So there's a lot of work to be done yet there. So I don't know if that answers your question. So I think I heard in the United States, is there anything, I didn't catch the last part. Oh,
yes. Is there anything in the United States, any tribe in the United States that we can refer to or consult with? Because one worry or concern that I would have is making sure that whatever we implement is maybe trial tested with the Congress and the legal substance of that structure. That's what I'm looking for.
Yep, okay, thank you. Okay, I understand now. So one example that first comes to mind is the MCT, which is the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. They have different bands, and one of those is White Earth. And in 2013, I want to say, they had a referendum to change their constitution from 1/4 to lineal descent. So that meaning that you have to prove that you have a connection to whatever your original tribal census rolls are. So so they are an example, and that the referendum passed to change that in the Constitution by a landslide. It was like incredible turnout for the elections, but the problem that they're having now, and a lesson that can be taken, is implementing that. So the people spoke, the majority of people spoke, and again, we're talking about consensus versus majority. So the people feel like they spoke out to end blood quantum, at least in that way, and move to lineal descent, which is still kind of in that box, but they were trying to step away from the 1/4. And people are frustrated because they feel like they weren't heard. So the minority that was against the referendum has pushed back a lot. So my understanding is, and Jill Dorfler, she's White Earth, and she's at the University of Minnesota at Duluth. She's one I would encourage you to talk to because she's very knowledgeable and was part of the efforts to make that constitutional change from early on. So that's one example within the United States. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take another question. Ron?
Okay. Good morning again, everyone. And it's the Sayawakshan way. Chicken that way, Gayos, do it the Ian, ho, say up, Squan, say hopa, draw them. I just wanted to, I've always been taught, I don't know if it's one of those offshoots of the 5 core values that were identified over and over yesterday, and I know that probably because they were indicated primarily in our language, it's probably hard for you to recapture those, but there was 5 things, you heard, you saw probably people's hands go up and they would say 5, especially with Rick and Conrad that were here yesterday. But one of those things that I'll just say now, because you never know when you have another chance, but to you, Norbert, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. And thank you for paving the way for our participation at the national level in the National Museum of the American Indian. You paved the way for me to participate for 6 years. What an experience for us, somebody from a whole other tribe from the Midwest to do that. And then in turn for Rich, Dr. Rich Lowarke to now serve on that. So we've been honored to do that. It's a privilege, and I hope that somehow we continue to have a stream of, if not Laguna people, Pueblo people to serve on that board, because it's an important voice to have back there that people just don't realize. And the access to information and artifacts and history of our Native peoples across the nation, thank you. So thank you.
Thank you, Ron. What I loved about this conference is that you use your language interchangeably. And I don't know what you're saying, but I love the sound of it. In some of our values, some may be similar or not, but one is we value the good mind, and we value the good in each other, and that we support each other. So we all have different values that we talk about, but some words just don't translate in language. But there are going to be hundreds of tribes that are going to deal with this issue of blood quantum. And in a sense, the Lagunas, you guys are trailblazers, so you may be setting a model here a little bit.
Well, thank you, my brother.
Yeah, thank you.
The real question I had, other than doing my duty to say thank you, is have you been able to or seen successful sort of Native civics programs? I know we've been bouncing that around quite a bit, because I think here at Laguna, with all the conversations that we have, when Rich and I are talking about different topics, I'm talking with Robert Anaya, talking with the governor, talking with everybody, it just seems to us, and we're sort of talking around it, there may be some initiative that's going on, but if there's a model where we could do it, or maybe it's just one of those things that we just got to do to set up our own civics class, because my civics class was being on the staff for Governor Roland Johnson and all the governors that I was able to work with. Yeah. I think I worked with 7 or 8 of them. Each one of those was a civics class for me. Mm-hmm. Every time we took a ride to a meeting somewhere, or we're flying across the country to DC, or flying wherever on a business trip, my opportunity to ask both for language translations, when I would try to understand a word that I heard in council, because when I first had my exposure to tribal council, and the entire meeting was in Laguna, and so that was difficult. So the only thing I could do is doing what I'm doing right now, which is taking notes, and I do my best to spell these things phonetically, and then later on ask them, what does this mean, So I had to be careful with words like hanami I mean, if you write it down and you do the best you can, because there's another word that's very close to it, which is hanami. East naked. So, those are things that you write down and you wonder, okay, well, if somebody's trying to write down something phonetically that isn't from Laguna, it would be different unless you talk to Laguna and say, "Ais hanami si chenyi," or "Ais hanami si chenyi." See how that sounds? Those kind of things. And, I had lots of fun with them. They were kind enough to teach me to not get into trouble with those words.
Yeah.
But I think that the civics portion is something that we have sort of initiated from the Cultural Center when I was there, to have our youngsters and throughout the state learn about the true Native and Pueblo Indian history here, including other tribes. But it seems like we need sort of our own leadership academy here at Laguna, because we have youngsters that are just those that are sitting right around the table here, that if we could teach them now, they'll be more effective leaders, when their time comes, because you can just see it in their faces. You can just see that they desire to learn more now so that they can become effective leaders. So.
Yeah. It's just not about the young people, and certainly we should be able to put some curriculum together. But we found in Oneida is the old people, the middle-aged people don't know it either. So the beauty of the computer age is that you can put lessons together on the internet, and people far and wide and close by can learn from those lessons. So I think you have all the information. Sometimes it's in different spots, but that's what we have to do. There's also, getting back to this other gentleman's question, the Potawatomis have a solution how they dealt with their sections of the country in terms of how they vote. And so you'll find some other models in the book.
One question that I had was when you mentioned about citizenship for tribes and for the country. If you want to delete blood quantum, I think when you talk about sovereign nation, that hopefully that where these nations are, or for our people here, that we actually make it our own, where a federal government can't say, well, we can take it away from you because you're not this. And the way I understand it, if you're born in the United States, you're automatically a United States citizen. So if we want our people to be Lagunas, then they have to come home and be born on our land, to say if we want our reservation to be a sovereign nation. So they had to come here, they'll automatically be a tribal member, to say. But the way this issue about blood quantum, yeah, down the line, it's going to affect a lot of people. It already affects a lot of people. So we're talking about a way to get away from that. But I guess this is one idea that I have, that make where the United States government acknowledges that we are a nation and this is our land. So whatever we do here stays here and stays with our people. But that question came up when you mentioned about citizenship. So that's one thing that I'm looking at. Thank you very much.
This conversation is not an easy one, and it can get messy. But you have to win hope over despair, and that at the end of the day that you're going to come to the conclusion, and only you can decide. Only you can decide, nobody else. So you need to save yourselves from yourself and each other and come out on the other end. So again, thank you very much. You've been a wonderful group to work with.
I'll take one more question, Paul.
Dr. Cox, James Star. Tonight, yeah, we try and I try to shift to make a shift to host care. What's the name? It was good. That's mom. See, hey, she's better when you just it more so that no, it's just kind of get hey, she's just tiny head Zia Kaich, Muke Heshikish Kunama, Eshemua Waits, Eshishna, Western Zeus, Heshis in the Kasinsh, Mua Shirt Guado, Dinakajadran, comparative models. Mua Dijuk Awik, Shirtana uses Chakwa, Shirti Het New Alchemistrus, Et Commit Guad, the Na Meek, Shahana Jem, Shuna Meek Haweti, Haash, Sam, Shamua Tia, Et Tasuki. Yuna Shirti Guagume, Guashirti Het Tidranaku, Katie Mamti, Gutat, Guashirti Het Nidranaku, such a Emhesh Ubeta with Sikh. It Okay, Dr. Hill, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. And my condolences for having to live in Green Bay. I'm a Viking fan. But I really enjoyed what you had to say. And I don't mean any disrespect to you by speaking in Laguna. But the question I had was, I came back here this morning specifically to hear about what specific models that other tribes have used for changing their membership recognition. I know in this state, pueblos like Zia and Tsuki have changed their membership recognition laws, or whatever, however they do it. But that's what I wanted to hear, and I think that's what most of the people want to hear. You have a lot to say, and I appreciate everything that you said, but I would like to really hear what those models are, because we are looking at changing our way at some point in the future. And I think it's important for all of us to be aware of all the different models that are out there that we might consider.
So a lot of tribes are going to lineage, much like the Cherokees. And I was in Albuquerque with the American Graduate Center, and the mother called me, and she was irate. She says, I want you to know that my son is 13th 256th degree Cherokee, and why isn't he getting a scholarship? And I said, ma'am, if he cuts himself shaving, how much blood is left? And I held the phone out here, and you could hear her screaming at me from Oklahoma. So a lot of tribes, but lineage is just another form of blood quantum. That's what it is, and it's probably an easy decision, but in the long run, it's going to bite you. There are some models in the book. Again, I'm going to say the Potawatomis, the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. Can you think of? El Saleta del Sur in Texas. We can put a synopsis of the models that we know. We'll send them to Richard, and he can get them out to you. I think that would be the easiest way to do it. Yeah, and we're stuck right now, and I don't know which way our tribe is going to go, so.
Okay, thank you again to Norbert and Kathleen, and I'd just like to say, I met Norbert in the late 1980 something, or in Haskell, and I always remember the things that he told us out there as a teacher when I was a part of ACES, and so I really encourage the young people that are out in the audience to become active in ACES. That is a very good program, and Norbert is the founder of ACES, and it's to your advantage to become involved in that society. So I'd just like to say thank you to Norbert and Kathleen again.
Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next item. We do have a break scheduled at 10:30 to 10:45. Yesterday, we did not take any breaks, and I realized the information and the amount of information you were all getting was pretty heavy and a lot. So we could kind of see the pressure on folks' face yesterday. So to maybe try to help that as you process information, we're at 10:35. So let's take a quick 10-minute break. If you need to get some more coffee or stretch your legs for a bit, please do so, and we'll start back up at 10:45. In the meantime, I'll be calling Governor Sayo, Dr. Paul Motter, and Professor Hershey up to the stage.